Hello, everybody. Welcome to a bit of a special for EduFuturists today. We have to keep moving ourselves to make sure we're in the centre of the camera view. We've got a great conversation today, a roundtable discussion, a little bit different than our normal podcast, but a discussion with two tech partners, Strive AV and BenQ, and we're going to be bringing them on in a moment to talk about future-proofing your classrooms. So we know this is something we've talked about, lads, and we know that technology plays a vital role in that. Even in our EduFuturist Trends booklet that went out at our event recently, we talked about one of the key pillars is around technology, isn't it? So yeah. We're looking forward to this discussion.
I'm looking forward to it because I think a lot of the times and I suppose it's probably because there's two philosophy teachers within us. Steve's a sports teacher, so can you even call that a teacher? Anyway, so the fact that we know
compared to your 1 year, I think it equates to the same thing, doesn't it? 17 years.
How do you meet people again, Ben?
So he loves to banter, but he won't take it back. I think we need to be a bit more formal on this one.
No, but it's good. I think because our heads are in the clouds quite a bit with this show, and it's kind of what we do, isn't it? We dream of what's possible, and we talk about the amazing stuff that's going on around the world. But actually, one of the things that we've been talking about recently is how do we put things into actionable steps and actually provide solutions for schools who can't afford to look down the line 10 years and go, what's coming? Because they've got a hell of a job going on at the minute. So actually, I'm looking forward to getting into some actionable steps, some quick solutions, some easy solutions, affordable solutions in today's episode.
Yeah, and interestingly, we used to be called, do you remember, in the studio with the EduTech project, our first iteration. So our first foray into this kind of podcasting space was around technology, wasn't it? So
do I need to leave back to that because I wasn't involved in that one?
No, you're allowed to stay. We've let you back in. You've been here long enough for you to be able to know about our deep dark secrets.
The logo we mentioned this at our event. The logo has changed massively from the space rocket. Time machine / something else that it might look like to now the branding that Dan's created this week. We're all wearing it. We talked about this, didn't we? Look at this.
On brand.
Keep on camera and sway a little bit, but yeah, we did mention it, didn't we? We talked about the grand thing that what we're trying to achieve, and there is no finish line. Like the 1980s Nike advert, there is no finish line in terms of innovation. There's iteration, there's development, there's revolution, but also at times, like Dan said, we spend so much time speaking about literally 10, 15, 20 years maybe in advance, but it's nice to come back to actually the stepping stones and the breadcrumbs that will lead us to that big scale innovation. I think these concepts, these focuses, and also some of these products are great for it. I think they're leading the way, and I think we'll talk about and touch upon some of the technology that actually, when people mention some of the terminology, they just think one thing, but actually it's gone so much further as a product and as a solution. I think it's going to be good to unpick that today.
For sure. So without further ado, we'll bring in our guests who are going to be on this roundtable with us. So pleased to be joined by Toni Moss from Strive AV, and we've got Lisa Yates from BenQ, and we've also got Andrew Strachan, who is newly appointed CIO at the Emmanuel Schools Foundation. Congratulations, Andrew, on that one. I know you're going to introduce yourself in a moment. Over to you first, Toni. Tell us a little bit about you and Strive.
Good morning. I'm Toni Moss, Managing Director of Strive AV. Strive AV is a system integrator. We've been around for 23 years. I've actually been in education far longer than that. We love AV. We're passionate about what we do.
Thank you. And the right thing to say at this moment is, Toni, you don't look like you could have ever been in education longer than 23 years.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. It's aging me even more in the last couple of years, but yeah, thank you.
No problem. Thank you. And then we've got Lisa, who I think we know a little bit.
Yeah, just a bit. So head of channel sales for BenQ UK. I, like Toni, have been in the industry for some time now. So I've been working in education from a technology point of view for 17 years. And at BenQ for 6, just running the sales team here and obviously working with the likes of you guys as a partner.
Thanks, Lisa. And we're looking forward to. Obviously, there's a little bit of a disclaimer here. Most people know that for 12 months I lived on a bus with the BenQ team, going around to schools, colleges, universities, talking about BenQ products. So when I make jokes about knowing Lisa, that's the reason why. And last but not least, with a very proud Derby County shirt, I believe, in the background, is Mr. Andrew Strachan. This is now a hat trick, I believe, of appearances with EduFuturists. So, Mr. Strachan, tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I'm Chief Information Officer at Emmanuel Schools Foundation. We're a geographically dispersed map in the northeast. I've got just over 7,500 students and about 1,000 members of staff. And I've got strategic responsibility for all aspects of IT, digital, media, data and comms across the trust.
Love it. And like I said, newly appointed into that role. And a lot of schools, a lot of teachers, students, and so getting the technology right and the infrastructure right around that is huge. And we know that we'll get into some of how you have done that and how you've worked with the partners on the call to help make that happen as well. So the whole point of this roundtable is to consider that question about how to future-proof, easy for me to say, how to we're called EduFuturists and I can't say the word future, never mind, how to future-proof your classrooms, schools, the infrastructure that sits with it. So that's what we want to talk about today. And we know that we a lot of the time on the podcast talk about the distant future, and where we think things are going, the weak signals of where things are going to be going in terms of AI and blockchain and Web3 and all that kind of stuff, as well as whether we'll go to a PBL type thing or something similar. But ultimately, what we're talking about specifically today is this idea around developing a future-proof classroom setup, particularly around AV stuff and front of class display. So I think where we'll go first is to talk about the issue. So we can't talk about the future of the classroom and where we want to go until we can really ascertain and develop what we're saying is the challenge in the sector. Steve.
Yeah, so I think to come in there in regards to everybody's going through it, whether you're at home and you're talking about turning every single light off, and if you go out of the house for more than 15 minutes, you have to turn every plug off. The economic crisis, the cost of everything, but also the investment into schools, colleges, and education has come to the forefront more than ever. Has that been a discussion? Do we feel that digital poverty, do we feel that education in terms of an entity, in terms of its funding, has led a discussion in regards to why we're starting to think about different practices, do we feel? And I don't know who wants to pick that up, whether that's Toni first or anybody, and just start to go down that avenue in regards to what do we think the schools are and what the impact could be by the new solution and the new focus.
I think it's been very, very tricky for schools, colleges, because, like you say, electrical costs have gone up, energy. There are obviously staff increases, which the government have not supported them. Years ago, we used to have a massive big lump of money pushed into education. And we kind of don't see that anymore, which is a shame. I'm going back to the Bector days when they rolled out the whiteboards, because we were one of the Bector companies. And, these kids that they are educating, they're our future. They are going to be running our country. They need to have the latest technology. They need to have kit that's working, and I expect if you went around all the schools, you probably find that, some of these schools are just getting by, which is really not acceptable, is it really? When, years ago, we had this massive pump into the education system through Bector. We can't just do it and forget it. We need to continue doing this. That's kind of where I sort of come from.
Yeah, and just to jump in there before anybody else comes in, I think BYOD and resilience on parents and children bringing their own devices used to be a thing, especially in the further education sector. I know we're going to cover multi-academy trusts and schools as well. But really, actually, the demand has been put and the issue has been pushed onto schools. I worked in an inner city Leeds college that was affected, where actually, you know, there was so much deprivation in some of our areas of the city that the diversity of device that was brought in, or even diversity from tech in a classroom was so different. So the demand has now been pushed onto the organisation, but there isn't the income coming from different streams, and they're trying to be clever and trying to think about different ways they can generate more money coming in rather than just funded by the student. But how do you afford it? Like, you know, there's an issue, like say, for digital poverty across the nation. Schools are expected to prop it up, but then there isn't enough money in schools to try and to take those steps forward. How do we tackle that? Big question. I don't know if Andy. I don't know if you want to jump in, Andy, because you're living and breathing it from.
I think the challenge is schools in general are really complex places to run, and I think anybody outside of education probably doesn't see how complex they are to run, and the complex funding that's needed to run a successful secondary or primary and a successful multi-academy trust. And I think within that, you have to have people in the chair with seats at the top table who are willing to engage in creative solutions to allow us to continue to innovate, to allow us to put the very best in front of students in whatever part of the sector that may be it technology, be it teachers, be it teaching and learning resource. And I think at the minute there is still a reluctance in a significant part of the sector to give IT and digital the seat at the top table that it needs in order to influence, but also a reluctance to consider those creative solutions to think about how we navigate around it, rather than the default of, well, we just won't do that.
Yeah,
and I think that's possibly where we're at.
I think you're right, and I think tied to that is this massive element that Toni was talking about there in terms of funding into schools. We all remember the wonderful education speech, and then since 2010, essentially, we have, and this is not political at all, it's just the reality of per pupil funding in the UK. The stats suggest that they are 3% lower now than they were then in 2010. So that tells you that in real terms, the money going into schools is lower, and then the outgoing costs for schools has increased. So you don't need to be an economist to work out, if you've got less money coming in and more money going out, then you've got less money to spend on the things that some people will consider to be commodities. And we actually, I think where we're going here is that we're suggesting that the tech is not a commodity. And I wonder if any of you want to speak to that phrase, that it's more than a commodity.
I think it's probably a right in 2023, isn't it? That's the top and bottom of it, that no matter where you are in the country, no matter what your socio-economic backgrounds, no matter how you come into the education system, where you come from, be it our country, be it abroad coming into the UK, you have a right to have the same equipment that you would potentially have at home, or that you would see your friend 2 doors down having and using, or your friends who you play football with a weekend, what they tell you they've got in their school. You should have a right in 2023 in our education system to have that in front of you to benefit you. Shouldn't matter where you are in the country. Shouldn't matter whether you are on the south coast, in seaside, nice leafy green school, or whether you are in northeast, northwest, anywhere sort of north of Weatherby services. It shouldn't really matter where you are in the country. You should have the same access and the same right to everybody else, because you cannot exist in our current world without technology and without seeing, using and interacting with technology. It doesn't matter what you're doing or where you're going. You have to be able to engage with it, and you have to be able to engage with it from a really early age.
I think you're spot on there. I think even in the Declaration of Human Rights, it says that people should have a right to education. And actually, if we're really honest with ourselves, education just a narrow view of education isn't enough anymore. We have to recognize that our children, our students, learn through technology. I've got a 2- and 3-year-old at home, and they probably heard, I mean, I don't know if this is probably a reflection on me, but I think they learn a hell of a lot more through the technology that we have in the house than they do through me. And it's just the reality. I mean, I think I'm the same. It's accessible. It's instant. And I think to deny certain students that while other students have got it in abundance is wrong. Is plain wrong. And people recognize that. Even in we were talking a couple of years ago with Lord Jim Knight about this, and he was talking about how he was working with projects where they were getting Wi-Fi into refugee camps. So they were literally like paying somebody to go around with a Wi-Fi router in a backpack, and they would walk around the camp and make sure that everybody had access to Wi-Fi, because they recognized that even in those extreme circumstances, people needed access to the internet as something that was going to bring them value to their lives. And I think it probably emphasizes the difficult situation that schools are in when this isn't a priority. And I think I think it's complex, isn't it? Especially if I mean, I've been working with a few head teachers recently where technology is like at the top of their agenda, and it's really, and so things they make it simple because they learn about it. They make contact with companies, they make partnerships. But if you're not that type of head teacher, you're not that type of school leader, it seems like a bit of a complex world to get into. And I think making things as easy as possible and providing the simple solutions is definitely needed.
Yeah, and I'll call it out. I don't think it's on there. People might be amazed by this, but we often do have a script on the Edge of Futures podcast. But I'm going to go off script, and I think in my work outside the Edge of Futures, but also my work in and I'll call it back to further education. There's so much stuff in regards to digital poverty, but also just poverty in general, whether that's in the Highlands of Scotland, and actually the rural nature of the country means that people can't travel in, and Wales. So working in Wales and thinking about some of the aspects of further education. How can we, when people have economic barriers and poverty, so they're looking after their carers, their parents to young children, they can't afford bus fare. How can we extend learning beyond the four walls of a building and a classroom? And I think the technology that I've seen, and BenQ is doing that. I've seen hybrid rooms popping up because of this. Thinking about the climate as well, the impact of busing people in from different rural locations, when actually you can, and I think a lot of time was spent on what is in the classroom to make it actually fit and exciting. But actually, I think taking it outside of the classroom, it's also what the experience on the other end is for that individual that's in isolation, but trying to beam into the rest of the 20 or 30 that's in the classroom. And that extends and will extend into education. There are over 1 million children that are outside of education at any one time in the UK. Alternate provision plays a part, but there's also 1 million or over 1 million children that don't sit the endpoint exams and GCSE. How can we use this technology in regards to the climate, whatever that be, to extend learning to those individuals? It could be social or well-being. The reason that anxiety is playing a part and is on the rise. It could be those things that are stopping people coming in. Actually, they can feel part of that learning journey, but just actually using the technology that we're going to talk about on the discussion today. Toni, I don't know if you want to join somebody who's been in the industry and who's leading those conversations and engaging with schools on a regular basis. Are you seeing those kind of things come to the forefront more?
I have, and I actually think, I know you touched on it just a minute ago. I think actually COVID was quite scary, wasn't it, for most people? And I was pretty scared. I was, I thought if I caught it, I'd be seriously ill. Because but actually, I think it's done the world a bit of a favour, because it's it's made us all sit back and be a little bit more, oh, okay, we can't have it tomorrow, we'll accept it, which is good in some cases. But the other thing is, what it's actually going to do is it's going to make learning accessible to anybody. So people that can't go to university because they anxiety or medical conditions, or just can't afford to go, we have now the ability to offer courses remotely across the world. And I think that's actually quite exciting. But it's whether we embrace it. It's whether, from, God forbid we get COVID, we get another horrible disease like COVID that comes in. Actually, the schools will probably be able to carry on and still offer all of that remotely. I know they did it as well as they could do, but now they have the ability to actually run a full hybrid, learning system. I mean, Andrew's probably got more to say on that than me, but it's quite interesting, I think.
Yeah, and
I think that idea of hybrid learning is something that a lot of places saw, got to grips with during COVID, lived with in 2021. And then what we're seeing is some places have taken that and pushed on, but a lot of places have sort of dropped off. And one of the conversations I hear, not so much within ESF, but certainly when I speak at conferences and go to networking roundtable type stuff, is, oh, that was such a COVID thing, wasn't it? And it's like, well, actually, no, it could be such a current thing if you really genuinely wanted it to be, and leverage those benefits from putting the right kit in the right places, not just for the hybrid solution for staff and students, but for central teams. The number of multi-academy trust central teams who are operating, as you can see, in a hybrid environment has really extended that on. But to do that, you've got to be able to put the right kit in the right place, and you've got to be able to put it in at scale.
Yeah, for absolute sure. And I think when we talk about them, it's multiple issues. This isn't it? It's a financial issue. It's a digital poverty and tech equity issue. It's an issue around what do we do rather than just putting the genie back in the bottle, as our good friend Bob Harrison would say. It can't go back in post-COVID. We can't just say, right, hybrid's done, online learning's done, digital done, and let's go back to the real time of teaching. We're not saying that. So there's multiple issues here. It's not straightforward, but we know that when we're starting coming up with solutions here, that we're really keen, as Dan talked about in the intro. Often we talk about there's so many problems, but we want to come up with solutions. We don't just want to be known to be people that bang the drum and say this is rubbish. Let's do something about it. And I know that the three guests who are on the call today are. I've been involved in a number of different opportunities to create solutions in this. So, Lisa, I wonder if you could just kind of talk about the tech solution that you've that BenQ have created in terms of why the BenQ products might be useful in this future proofing.
Yeah, sure. I mean, if we come at it from a hybrid point of view, because obviously we've kind of gone into talking around hybrid. So, for us, the interactive panel at the front of class creates kind of an anchor or center point for the classroom. But with our software that comes with it, you can dial in remotely, you can link it to any video conferencing platform. It's accessible to anyone because it's browser-based. So we're not saying that you have to have a particular type of device that hits a certain spec for you to have access to our tools and teaching resources and materials. We've partnered with people like Sensory Tech or Sensory Tech, people like Kahoot. So people that are already out there really kind of making waves with teaching resources that sit within that remote ecosystem as such. And we've built them into the screens as well. So yeah, for us, it's about creating really solid hardware that sits at the front of the class, but also gives you that hybrid solution if people are, working from home, or there's a scenario where we need to go back to a hybrid learning environment.
Yeah, and for sure. And I think the management elements that sit within there as well make a huge difference from a cost saving perspective. Before we get into the specific solution we've looked at here, that and I wonder if you, and I'll come back to you again, Lisa, but I wonder if you could maybe talk about AMS DMS as a cost saving solution and how that's really helping schools and colleges.
Yeah, sure. So our cloud services, which is made up of AMS and DMS, they're managing and monitoring tools for your interactive panels. So for Andrew, who obviously looks after a trust with lots of schools sitting within it, having something like DMS actually allows you to control and monitor and health check your panels without the need to actually go into that classroom space. So you can manage all of the content and your screens remotely. So it cuts down on things like travel time, needing to have that technician travel to site just to fix a problem. You can fix those issues just by looking in the system and actually looking at it from there. So our management solution is complementary. It's part of our system. It works with all of our interactive panels and our digital signage panels as well. So it really gives you this one space as an IT team where you can manage and kind of consolidate all of your AV.
Love it. And I think the idea around that management being not needing people keep going onto site, and the fact that it can be done remotely and that there's an oversight, and then obviously that conversation more about from a sustainability perspective and from a financial perspective in terms of being able to remotely turn screens off, save energy, all them kind of things. We can do that thing that we were talking about earlier. So there's less money coming in, but there's more money going out. So if we can either get more money coming in or get less money going out, that's what we're hoping for here. So as we come into this, we're going to look at this specific solution then. So one of the big solutions is around kind of affordable, future-proof solutions around leasing. So that word has sometimes been a bit of a dirty word in education. It isn't a dirty word in education. I know Steve's really passionate about making sure that we get on this conversation today about leasing. So, Toni, I wonder if you could just kind of talk at that for us about leasing and what you are and what that solution looks like in comparison to what other people have done before.
I agree with Steve as he spoke earlier about, we lease cars, if we want to buy some furniture, we'll go to Next and we buy interest free or whatever, we all do this, right? So, it's important that the schools, rather than do one here, one there, because we're not offering the same technology in all the classrooms at all the time. So there's disadvantages from the staff, trying to learn the equipment, going into different rooms, having different equipment. Obviously, there's downtime to that from a class point of view. And also it's, it gives people, teachers are not so confident in going to use the equipment. So when schools can offer large projects and do leasing in one hit, it's fantastic because it's affordable. It's then done around your payments that come in yearly from the government or quarterly or monthly or whatever you want. You then know what you're spending out each month on your equipment. And we're seeing it more and more where the large projects are being funded through the leasing side. And it's a shame because the ones and twos you're not seeing so much, but I think it's either the schools are a little bit nervous about leasing, so they won't do it, and they'll carry on doing the little ones or twos, but we're not seeing a lot of that. We're seeing more of the bigger projects, but not enough of the bigger projects, if you know what I mean, because otherwise we'd all be inundated and we'd have Vector all over again. So, but yeah, leasing is so affordable. It's easy. There's no stigma around it now. It's an everyday kind of occurrence.
Yeah, and I think it gives options to organisations. I think the worst position we could be in is people want something that feel that it's actually out of their grasp. So they say, well, actually, I want this. I'd love this. This is the art of the possible, and this is what I've seen. And then they come to it and go, I'm not sure I can really afford that. well, actually, it makes it more affordable if they can do it and do it on large scale. So I know that you're not always going to be buying a Porsche. I'm not saying go buy there's always something that's beyond a budget, but you'd never do that for a sofa, as an example. If you wanted a new sofa that you could fit all the family on, you wouldn't then say, oh, well, I know I'd really like that big corner sofa, but I'll just get the 2-seater and I'll squeeze the family on with the 2 kids and the dog. Just you start to think about the leasing options. I think you do it with a car, you do it with all these different things, and I think there's so many conversations that we have and people have, and then go, oh yeah, I'd love that, but I think it's beyond me. I think that the solution is actually affordable anyway, but I think leasing puts a different slant on it to make it even more affordable, so that you can get the device and the technology that you feel that you want and you need, but also you can do it on mass scale. And I don't know if anybody of our guests want to talk to that, and how, and I know Andy might come in and talk about, actually, is that the way that you approach it as an organisation and as a trust?
Yeah, I think harnessing that idea of leasing isn't a dirty word is really, really important. And I think just to reinforce that point again, it is there and it's apparent in our day-to-day lives. I think most people will have a mobile phone on contract, and they'll just think, oh, yeah, it's on a contract. They won't have clocked on that actually you're essentially renting the phone and paying for your phone plan at the same time. It's on a lease. A significant proportion of the country will have a car, like you say, on lease. You get a car, you lease it, you give it back, you get a new car. It's a model that works really, really well. And I think schools and education are probably still have enough people in them who've maybe been stung a little bit by the past, and we've got to navigate our way through that. Leasing in 2023 is not the same as leasing used to be, and certainly in ESF, we have found it to be a really, really positive experience. Which is bizarre to say, because when I joined the trust, all of our printers were on lease. And then sort of this whole big conversation around, well, actually, leasing, what do we mean? So I kind of went, well, our printers are on lease, so why don't we think about leasing X, Y, and Z? And for us, it really started out of COVID, where we knew we wanted to grow our portable device infrastructure at scale. So we went for lease. We did a small classroom project at one of our schools before we kind of decided what we wanted to do. We had a need very much there and then, and we did that on lease. And once we kind of got the ball rolling and found that actually there is a pretty straightforward path to work through, and there are some systems and processes that you've got to get right internally to make sure you get it right. You've got to get your procurement right. You've got to understand what you're engaging with. You've got to make sure you've got the right people round the table, rather than just going off a kind of Wild West and doing it yourself. But if you put those structures in place and make sure that you follow your process and you work with suppliers to make sure that process is fair and transparent, then there's absolutely nothing wrong with leasing. And what it enables you to do is it enables you to buy at scale, which gives you the opportunity to get more for essentially less money, and you can spread it over time. But for us, the real driver was our ability to reduce the microclimate of digital poverty within the trust. So when I inherited my job, what I found was that we know digital poverty is a problem in the country, but actually within our organisation, it was a problem. We had students at a digital disadvantage, not even to others in the trust, but to others in the same geographical location in Gateshead, for example. So for me, being able to go with lease and do it at scale has enabled us to stick with one of our key elements of our trust digital strategy, which is that every student and every member of staff should have exactly the same classroom experience in terms of their technology. There should be a baseline of digital equity across the piece. If individual schools want to then specialise beyond that, then we'll support them to do that. But there's got to be a minimum baseline of digital equity, and leasing, because of the opportunities to buy at scale, has enabled us to take ourselves part way down the journey. We've got a little bit further to go, but certainly well down that journey to reducing the digital poverty and delivering digital equity to our staff and students.
So you said about, what did you say, about 13 years ago, leasing's very different and is improved. What's I suppose for someone who's been in education a long time, maybe a bit cynical, what has changed? What have you seen as the major changes, and what makes it an easier process or a better process for you now?
I think it's certainly for me, it's more transparent. Yeah, no offense to anyone else in the call. I wasn't in education 13 years ago. I was doing a different job. I was relatively freshish out of uni. But in kind of working with people who were in education at the time, their comments are that leasing now it's more transparent, it's easier to engage with. There are frameworks around it that you can work within to give yourself organizational protection, I guess. And those are approved by the DFE, which means that if you engage in that and you work with that framework, you know that your audit trail is essentially covered. And for us, that's really important. You know, we cannot just go off on a 100K plus project without knowing that our audit trail is covered, because ultimately, you know, we're not going to talk necessarily about bottom line in terms of financial numbers, but the bottom line for me is whenever I go to work and whenever I spend significant volumes of money on kit I'm spending taxpayers' money, and that's the top and bottom of it. And in my head, I have to justify and ensure that I'm spending it in the right way. And the lease system and the frameworks that are around it and the security around it is significantly better than it was in the past. And I think for me, that provides some assurance that we are wisely spending taxpayers' money to get the best out of what we're going to do. And I think the knowledge around it as well, certainly the knowledge from the guys at BenQ and the finance and Strive and the finance partner around how you lease and what you lease, no question has ever been left unanswered. You know, the guys know what the answer is. They respond in the moment. They work as a little, I guess, triad to deliver it for you. And actually, from our side of it, apart from doing our due diligence, apart from making sure we've got our procurement right and making sure that the CFO is over the lease, it's really, really straightforward. You know, really, really straightforward.
I really liked, Andy, how that strategic approach as well that you talk about, and that kind of starting small, seeing how it works, getting it right, and then scale a bit more, getting it right, scale a bit more. And I wonder, just passing the conversation over to Toni or Lisa, whoever wants to jump in here, is that something you offer as part of the solution? Are you able to kind of hold the school's hand, as it were, and take them through that strategic approach to make sure that it's the best solution for them?
Yeah. We work with many different manufacturers, as well as BenQ, and you know, we always make sure that the schools are buying what's good for them. You know, so you can't. You know, a lot of schools have particular software needs and everything else. So we look at that, and then we look at, you know, offering finance that, you know, and so that they understand what they're buying. Whether they want to do over 3, 5 years, 4 years, you know, just making it easy for them, really, and just making it affordable, you know. So we're always there to advise them and help them in their procurement.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, interestingly, the principle behind that procurement, and having a little bit of an insight, and I know it'll come up in the conversation here, is that this didn't just land and go, right, Andrew's got a friend here, so he's going to get that person to give him his technology, and make it sure like a friend's concept. It went through a full process, and I think that's really important to stress here. And I know that Lisa and a colleague Luke went up to, I think, did you call it a shootout, Mr. Strachan? Is that what you called it?
You mean my Bet 2022 mental idea? Yeah, we did. So we kind of, I came into teaching from the live entertainment industry, and we used to bring lighting designers for concerts and tours from the States to our yard. We'd put out the latest moving lights and go, right, we're going to shoot out. Which one do you want on your tour? And we felt the best way to engage with our school leaders was, rather than having drip-fed demos, was to put what our procurement framework told us was the top 5 in the room at the same time and say, right, go for it. Show us your stuff in front of everybody else. And we took them to Strive were great. Strive got on board with the idea. Didn't need too much arm twisting from Matt and Matt, our accounts contacts. And to be fair to the spread of suppliers, they all got on board with it, you know, and I think they saw it potentially as an opportunity. I know the guys on the pod we've talked before that ed tech is a very broad church, and there is a place for everybody in there. But yeah, so we brought all the panels together. The guys did a sort of 4 or 5, maybe a little bit longer, demo and pitch to each of our senior leaders, and then we had a bit of an open house where all the panels were on all at the same time, and off you go. And I think that for us, that was really important because it gave school leaders an opportunity to impact in our procurement framework.
Yeah, I bet. Lisa, how did you find that?
Yeah, we're kind of used to the shootout concept, but I think the one that Andrew did was by far the most organised. There was a clear plan in place, and I think that's been kind of the running theme throughout all of this conversation. There was a clear plan in place of what the map wanted to deliver overall. And we kind of kept within that brief and worked around the product. We didn't get to see everyone else's pitches, which I thought was quite interesting. Everyone was kind of shipped off into a separate room whilst each vendor did their pitch. But it was a really good day.
Love it.
It was quite interesting actually, because in actual fact, a lot of the schools, when they do this shootout, they think they're going with one particular brand, but actually once they've had this shootout, it really does mix it up. It really does. And you'll be surprised how people think, a brand will think, a manufacturer will think, I've got this in the bag. But actually when the shootout, and I think it happened with you, didn't it, Andrew? So it's really interesting because it's important that you're great at your product and you're great at presenting your product, and that comes out on top, really.
By the way, just before I know Steve's going to move us on, I can't get anything out of my mind apart from that Peaky Blinders scene, which I won't actually quote verbatim that what they came here for. So I hope at least Lisa or Luke came in and had their jacket on, decided they were coming here for a shootout. Steve?
I don't know where to follow there. Apart from Dan's already creating the graphic for Peaky Blinders shootout or Whack-A-Mole. I don't know which one we're going to feature, but there'll be loads of different tech companies that pop up, and Dan's on it. But yeah, I think we've kind of started to touch on it. Just to call it out as well, for those people who are not in education, I think we touched upon the Nolan principles. And actually, it's something that I always aspire to. I've been out of education for a couple of years now, but the Nolan principles are so important, but actually they're a fact of public life. And if you're spending taxpayers' money, the ethical decisions behind it and the understanding of all of those principles is key. And education and people in education and decision makers are held to account by those. So yeah, if you don't know it, I'm not going to walk through it on this discussion right now. Google it, Nolan principles, and you'll see what Andy's talking about and how that relates. But we have touched upon impact. What I'm keen is with anything that we have a conversation about. And when I was a decision maker in education, I would say, can you show me the impact though? And those dancing robots at bet, and then shuddered into a corner. And this year it was dancing dogs. But anyway, we won't go into that one. But Andy and anybody in the call, as we started to go through, what were the results? What were we actually seeing as an impact from your transition from what was before the iteration and the strategy behind it, and now where you're at as a point?
I think there's the intentional benefits and there's the unintentional benefits. So in terms of intentional benefits, I think it would be fair to say that we are midway through the journey. So we probably haven't realised all of the intentional benefits yet. We are 18 months into a 5-year plan. But what we are seeing is that, and some of this is anecdotal, we are seeing in some quarters better engagement because students they can see what's in front of them. They can see what they're looking at that they couldn't historically. We have had some anecdotal comments when we've done kind of drop-ins and wanders round that students have said to us, well, it's like what I've got on the wall at home. They're seeing the kit that they're, in their vision, this is just a big telly. And I think that's important. In terms of staff, we're seeing that they're now getting the ability to start to innovate. So previously they would come into their classroom, they would teach, they'd have a projector, dry whiteboard, they'd write all over it, and then they'd rub it off. And that would be it gone. Or the savvy students would be, can I get my phone out and take a picture of that? And what we're starting to see now is staff inking directly onto the panel, that going into our cloud environment, and students having access to that at home, and that idea of breaking down the four walls of the classroom. So not only does that allow students to have access to that teacher modeling in the moment at home, as a member of staff, essentially what you're now having to do, rather than designing a resource, teaching, thinking, well, how do I get that resource for when the student gets home? What are they going to need? How are they going to do the homework? I come to our panel, I put my resource up, I teach on a model, I ink all over it. That's then automatically gone home to the students. So in terms of my lesson prep, I've just got to teach a really good lesson. I don't need to worry necessarily about the stuff that wraps around it, because students get it at home. We're also seeing, I guess, some of the unintentional benefits of increase in productivity around AV for our IT service teams, because a little bit like Lisa and Ben said earlier, they don't necessarily have to leave the office to go to the panel. They can be a little bit more agile in terms of their service and support. And ultimately, we've put new technology in the classroom that has significantly less moving parts than old technology. It means it doesn't break. We've seen a pretty much unified drop-off in classroom AV tickets for stuff needing repaired. And I think, you know, like any project where you operate at scale, people see that money is being spent on them. That is the perception. They're seeing that investment is going into staff, and that has a significant increase on morale.
I think what you were saying, and Lisa, I'm going to bring you in here. I think that whole idea of, and I think coming from you, Andrew, who's kind of in a leadership team of a really well trusted Matt, and as somebody who's in the northeast of England, got a massive reputation for good teaching and learning, and so to hear someone like you say, we just want teachers to be able to teach good lessons, and this technology enables it to happen. Where I think there's a lot of skepticism around technology comes from technology getting in the way of teachers being able to teach good lessons. So as someone from especially the Emmanuel Trust saying that, I think it holds a lot of weight. And I guess, I don't know if you want to pick up on that, and because I know you guys put a lot of effort into designing this tech so that it does exactly that.
Yeah, so we've designed everything to be really simple, integrate with the cloud, so allowing you to, as Andrew said, kind of pick up your resources or save your resources back to the cloud straight away. It's designed where you don't have to redo the resource, or, you know, teachers have a lot of material that they want to continue to use. They don't want to have to relearn a new piece of software and maybe even recreate those resources. So what we've done is we've created a platform that gives you nice, simple tools that integrate with the content that you have and allow you to concentrate on the teaching and not worry about the technology. Andrew went down the route of our RP series, which has an NFC sensor on the front, which just means, again, for simplicity, a teacher can walk into any classroom, swipe a card onto the screen, and it's going to sign them into their cloud profile and give them access to their learning resources straight away. So it's all about just really making the technology easy to use and integrate well into day-to-day teaching.
And Toni, as a result, as an organisation, Strive AV is not a box shifter. It's not somebody that thinks, right, somebody's just going to buy from us. Are you happy with the result in regards to the rollout? Are you seeing the benefits that you intended? Because I'm sure it's in collaboration, isn't it, with these schools that you're working with? So talk to it on your side and the benefit that you're seeing.
Roll that by me again. Just do the question again. What concept from Emmanuel's side?
Just in general, yeah, I suppose from what Andy talked about, but just in general, you know, when an organisation and you get the business, you know, let's talk about it from that. But actually, it's not just about that. It's about it's a collaboration. It's in conjunction with the school in terms of their needs and obviously then the manufacturer. Are you happy with what the roadmap that you set out from the leasing point of view, and also you as a company? Are you seeing the impact, and are you happy with the results as well?
Yeah, we're definitely happy with the results. It's, I mean, you know, from working with Emmanuel, for an example, obviously we did the shootout. We had to then go out to tender, and there was other companies involved. Obviously, it's not a Strive deal. It's a Emmanuel deal. And we were great. We were so happy. We were successful, you know, because with a lot of education projects, you're not always guaranteed to actually win the project. You might put a lot of work into it, but you're not guaranteed to win it. You've got to go in at the right price. You've got to offer the right service. You know, we might be the best company that Andrew's ever seen, but if we don't come in at the right price, because again, it's taxpayers' money, you know, and I totally 100% back Andrew in it. You know, you are spending taxpayers' money, and you need to make sure that you're getting the best for your school, and spending your money wisely, because as we talked at the start, this is not an empty pot that just keeps coming. You know, they've got to really think about what they're doing for their procurement for the next 3 to 5 years, and in some cases could be 7 years. So it's, you know, it's a massive decision, and we've got to be brilliant at what we do. And, you know, and I do pride myself in, you know, Strive's been going for 23 years. We're not a box shifter, but we work in the school market, and we work in colleges, and we work in universities, and we work in the corporate sector as well. So we work in all different sectors, and they're all very, very different. And it's just making sure that you're offering the right service at the right price, and having pride in what you do.
Yeah, for absolute sure. And I think the evidence, the proof's in the pudding, isn't it? The evidence is in the difference it's making, and obviously the solution that Andrew and the team up at Emmanuel decided to do was, rather than just do one classroom at once, they went in for they planned and strategized for their setup. They put a leasing plan in place and found good partners to work with on that. And they are in that 18 months into that 5-year journey. And I know that from a cost saving perspective, that's had a huge impact. But also it means that there is less upfront cost, which is always trying to get money out of the system is, and a big chunk in a big chunk is always difficult. So this solution, even though that's the obvious point that we're putting there about leasing, is that there is less upfront cost, but you get what they need, and the students can continue to grow that. So they're getting the best at the beginning of the project, rather than let's save up to try and get that school roof fixed or whatever else it is. So I think this is I think that's the key bit really for me, is that we're trying to give the best in-class solution for our students right from the off. And I think there's a move here that I can see that could be really useful for a number of trusts and number of school and college setups, where they're going to need to think about multiple screens across a location. Lisa, you wanted to come in.
So just on that cost saving side of things, now we did a little bit of a calculation on the cost saving from power. You know, power consumption and the cost of being able to, you know, keep the lights on in a school is a big thing at the moment. So your average classroom, which typically consists of a projector, interactive whiteboard, and audio system, if you switch that out for an interactive panel, you're going to save £250 a year per classroom based on current electricity bill costs. So that's a huge saving. If you think, you know, leasing, you're looking at a long-term goal, actually the immediate effect is going to be the cost saving in your bills, because of that change in technology and moving away from the older technology, which consumes more power.
Wow, that's pretty. That just in on its own is probably a good way to finish. Actually, if you want to save the money, there is an opportunity to move to a cost saving option. So it's been a fantastic discussion. I know that there'll be people who are watching this and listening to this who might want to find out a little bit more about the work of the people on the trust, on the RoundTable. Apologies. So firstly, if anybody wants to connect and find out the individual conversation about what's happening happened at Emmanuel or the work that Andrew's doing up there in the Northeast. Him and Dan are best pals up there in the Northeast. You can connect with Andrew on Twitter at Mr. Strachan _IT, easy for me there. So that's how you can connect with Andrew. If you want to discuss what that might look like for your mat, you can contact Toni and her team by going and having a look at striveav.com. You find out all of their solutions and the people working with, and BenQ specific education setup and systems, and looking at the future-proofing classroom solutions they've got. You can find out at benq.co.uk/education. So the links will come up on the screen there. They'll also be in the show notes. It's been a fantastic conversation, and really love when we can find solutions rather than just talk about the problem. So thank you, Andrew, Lisa, Toni, for joining us on this special roundtable, future-proofing your classroom today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks very much.